Hello mates! Welcome back to Budgie Gaming. I'm your host Finley. Well, Mario Tennis Fever has been out for a week now, and it's been the main game I've been playing since launch. While I have mixed feelings about the game, that isn't why I'm here. But if you would like to hear my thoughts on the game, I'll be making a video in a few weeks about every game I've played in February, which will include this game, so be sure to keep an eye out for that video. But for today, I want to rank all 30 Fever Rackets, starting from the worst and working my way up to the best Fever Racket in the game. If you're unfamiliar with Fever Rackets, these are rackets with special abilities. In order to activate your Fever Racket, you must first fill up your FV gauge, which is naturally achieved as the match goes on. You should be able to get off at least 3 Fever shots per match. Do keep in mind, this is just my opinion and preferences when it comes to these rackets. And since these are my opinions, I would love to hear yours as well. So let me know which racket is your favorite in the comments below. Real quick before we get into the ranking, if you enjoy this video, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button and checking out some of my other videos I've done, all of which are a huge help for small channels like mine. In last place, we have the personal racket. Yeah, it's essentially your basic bitch racket with no specials, so it's no surprise that this is in last place. There really isn't any benefit to this racket at all. The only time you'll be using it is if you decide to do matches without Fever Rackets, or early in the story mode when you're forced to use this racket. In the 29th spot, we have the Mini Mushroom Racket. Yeah, I don't really know about this one. It makes your opponent smaller, but besides that, I don't really know. Maybe it makes them a little bit slower. I'm wondering if it affects their stats, such as strength, but it's hard to tell. Either way, the patterns of these mushrooms are very easy to avoid if your opponent wants to, so the racket also has that working against it. Overall, this seems to be one of the worst rackets. Not only are the benefits extremely weak, but it's also not a whole lot of fun to use either. Coming in at 28, we have the Swerve Racket. This one is interesting. It looks like it'll give you some nice trick shots, but it never really seems to work out. CPU and real players seem to read the shots from this racket very well. I think the best case scenario for the Swerve Racket would be both players using it in a doubles match to make it more chaotic for the opposing team. Otherwise, it's not great. Kind of fun to use though. In the 27th spot, we have the Golden Dash Racket. This one would be higher because it's really beneficial when you're playing against the CPU opponents on the hardest setting or against online opponents. My main issue with this racket is it doesn't seem to work half the time when I use it. At first, it was definitely a skill issue, but once I figured it out, I still had trouble every so often. The racket offers some nice benefits, but it's not worth it for how finicky it is. Coming in at 26, we have the Bullet Bill Racket. This one is alright, it seems to be a bit hit and miss. It can do some serious damage to your opponent if it hits, along with pushing your opponent back some. The major thing this racket has going against it is if your opponent hits it back every time, the bullet does absolutely nothing. So if you're playing against someone with well-timed shots or on higher difficulty, you might want to avoid this one. Coming in the 25th spot, we have the Ice Racket. This one is just okay. It does sort of okay in CPU matches, but it's not super great against human opponents. The main issue with this particular racket against humans is it doesn't do anything to stop your opponents, like the Flame or Lightning Racket. It just makes movement slightly inconvenient. In the 24th spot, we have the Ghost Racket. This one is kinda useless when it comes to matches against CPU opponents. Like, it doesn't really do anything majorly beneficial. I had a match where we were both Ghost and had no clue where each other were, but we kept landing our shots. The reason it's as high as it is because this is a pretty good racket against human opponents, especially online. In the 23rd spot, we have the Fireflower Racket. This is a decent racket, but my least favorite of the 4 fire rackets. The Fireflower plays out exactly like Mario when he gets the Fireflower power-up. A few fireballs fly out every time you hit the ball, giving you multiple opportunities to hit an opponent per shot. It doesn't seem to work as well when you're playing far from the net, since the fireball spread is very wide. But if you're playing close to the net, you can really zero in on your target. Even then, it's not a guaranteed hit. The opponent seems to recover from this fireball rather quickly when compared to other flame rackets. The 22nd and 21st spots are interchangeable since they're basically the same thing. Coming in at 22nd, we have the Star Racket. This is one of those rackets that can either be a 1 or a 10 based on the rackets your opponents are using. If they're using annoying rackets such as the Ice Flower racket or Pokey racket, you'll absolutely love having the Star racket. But if your opponents are using something like the Shadow racket, or they're using the Star racket as well, then the Star racket will be absolutely useless to you. Luckily, more times than not, your opponents will be using a disruptive racket that deals damage, so I wouldn't completely dismiss this racket. In the 21st spot, we have the Metal racket. This is basically the same as the Star racket, just a slight boost in power instead of speed. But being invincible for a short while is nice. It's just a little annoying that there really isn't a way to tell when it's about to end. Coming in the 20th spot, we have the Fireball racket. This is one of those rackets that seem to work really well or really not so well. Sometimes it seems to be in the way of your opponent no matter what your opponent does. Other matches, especially on harder difficulty, they can read the rotation timing of the fireball so well that they can avoid it no matter what you throw at them. The opponent also has a ridiculously quick recovery time from this racket, which is what really knocks it down pretty far on the list. In the 19th spot, we have the Freezing racket. This is much better than the Ice racket, as it creates some nice barriers since so many ice traps appear from one shot. Sadly, this racket suffers similar problems as the Fireball racket, the previous racket on the list. The two main negatives for the Freezing racket is the ice traps don't last long on the court, and the opponents don't stay frozen for very long. The best part of this racket is how it sends so many ice traps out, so if it isn't freezing and trapping your opponent, then it might make them second guess going after the ball. In the 18th spot, we have the Spiny racket. So this one is kind of like the Pokey racket, one you will see much farther into the list, just not quite as good as the Pokey racket. One major benefit this racket has over the Pokey racket is the spiny creatures will crawl to your opponent, meaning they aren't safe anywhere. The major downside with this racket is the spiny creatures are super slow, so you really have to place your shots right to use them to their fullest potential. But once they catch up to your opponent, it's awesome seeing all three of the spiny creatures on the attack. In the 17th position, we have the Tornado racket. While I enjoy the Taifu racket a little bit more, this racket is still pretty cool. I think it works best when playing close to the net so you can send the tornadoes to your opponent at a quicker pace, while the tornadoes simultaneously reach the side of your opponent's net much quicker. Even though this isn't the best racket in the game, it's one of the most fun to use because it is one of the most disruptive and chaotic rackets in the game. In the 16th spot, we have the Banana racket. Overall, a pretty good racket. It has a nice spread since so many banana peels release from one shot, and if you manage to get two of these shots off closely together, you can cover most of the court for your opponent. Overall, a pretty good racket. At 15, we have the Inky racket. This is a crazy racket because this racket can be massively beneficial to you or massively screw you over. The beneficial part is the ball doesn't bounce very well in the ink, so you can pull off a lob shot to send your opponent far away. Only to pull off a drop shot into ink is a great way to score. The way it can screw you over is that ink is always flying at the screen, similar to the way it happens in Mario Kart. In the 14th spot, we have the Charging Chuck racket. This is a super fun racket. Basically, it turns the tennis ball into a football, which might not sound like much, but the football bounces in a much different way than the tennis ball, so you really have no clue where the ball is going to bounce once it lands. Can this screw you over as much as your opponent? Oh yes, absolutely, but it's a blast to play. And as long as you stay on your toes and play it smart, it shouldn't mess you up too bad. In the 13th spot, we have the Taifu racket. This racket is a blast to play with. Is it the most beneficial racket? Absolutely not, but it's definitely the most fun. Honestly, it's probably the racket that's going to screw yourself over. Even if the fever effect is on your opponent's side of the court, the way it blows the ball in a random direction can make things interesting and a little challenging for you. I will say that if you're looking for the rackets that's the most fun, this would be my top pick. In the 12th spot, we have the Shover racket. This racket is pretty interesting because of the way it pushes your opponent backwards, even if they successfully return the ball to you. It might not sound like much, but this can put you in the perfect position to pull off a drop ball shot for an easy score if you push your opponent back enough. If you happen to be on a court with a low bounce, such as the sand or grass court, then it makes this strategy all the better. Coming in at 11, we have the Amp racket. This might be the best racket for creating a large barrier on your opponent's side of the court. Having up to 3 of these guys out at the same time can take up a large portion of the court, and in some cases, making it extremely difficult for your opponent to reach the ball in time. At number 10, we have the Mud racket. This racket is pretty awesome. It's one of those rackets that's perfect for trying to land the fever shot on the far side of the court, trying to trap your opponent in the mud, since it slows them down considerably, and then aiming your next shot on the opposite side of the court. This works very well against CPU opponents, and pretty decent against human opponents as well. Basically, this racket is a lot like the Inky racket, but without the negative effects. In the 9th spot, we have the Flame racket. This racket works amazingly well when playing against CPU characters, but also works pretty well against real players as well, as it's tricky to maneuver around the flames, especially if you're lucky enough to successfully use 2 of these fevers in a row. The only downside to the Flame racket is if the fever special happens to land close to the net, you can get some flames on your side of the court. In the 8th spot, we have the Volcano racket. I love the unpredictability of this racket. Not only does it disrupt the location it lands in, but it continually shoots out volcanic rocks in random spots on your opponent's side of the court, leading to quite a bit of disruption. To make it even better, the volcano lasts for a decent amount of time, so your opponent will be annoyed for a while once you send this out. At number 7, we have the Ice Flower racket. I love this racket. It basically has everything in common with the Fire Flower racket besides, well, it's ice instead of fire. But that plays a huge role as to why this racket is so much better than the Fire Flower racket. Since it's ice, it completely freezes the opponent briefly to where they cannot do anything. The fire version of this racket allows for a quick recovery, and even sometimes allowing your opponent to get a swing in, even while on fire. But not with the Ice Flower racket, as your opponent can't do anything while frozen. In the 6th spot, we have the Question Mark racket. Basically, you have no clue what you're going to get. It can be anything from the other 29 rackets. While this makes it hard to strategize since you don't know what you'll be getting next. It makes for some awesomely chaotic gameplay, which is a huge win in my book. But the best part of this racket is that your opponent won't ever know what's coming next. In the 5th spot, we have the Lightning racket. I really like this racket. I particularly like how the size pulsates from smaller to larger radius. This might not seem like it'll make that much of a difference, but when you factor in how chaotic these matches can be, having to keep track of the lightning radius can add to a whole other level of annoyance for your opponent if they aren't paying attention. I know there were multiple times where I thought I was in a safe spot, only for the radius to expand to where I was standing. The other great thing with this racket is how it completely paralyzes the opponent, making it absolutely impossible for them to swing back. In the 4th spot, we have the Magic racket. The racket that suspiciously looks like a PlayStation racket is actually quite good. Not only can it do serious damage to your opponent, sending out damaging waves every time they hit the ball, but it turns your opponent's racket into a frying pan, meaning they can't use any special fever move. Plus, it's a really fun racket to use. Coming in at number 3 is the Thwomp racket. I was actually surprised by the multiple ways this racket could screw someone over. The obvious reasoning being it falling on your head, stunning your opponent for a second, giving you a chance to score. What I didn't see coming is if anyone hits the ball too high, it could be blocked by the Thwomp, which was a pleasant surprise to see. This is one of the very few, if only, fever rackets that benefits from hitting the ball in the same spot every time, as it encourages the Thwomp to land in the spot where the ball lands. Doing this will either make your opponent stand farther in the back as to not get crushed, risking the ball to be blocked by the Thwomp, or risk getting too close and being crushed. Coming in at number 2 is the Shadow racket. Even though this racket is basically Mario Tennis with training wheels, I absolutely love this racket. It gives you a few seconds to play exactly the way you want to play, while the Shadow can pick up any holes you'd leave on the court, which is sometimes all you need when you want to play super aggressively. It's also one of the most helpful rackets in the game when playing against higher difficulty opponents, or online play when you feel outmatched. And for the number 1 spot, we have the Pokey racket. I don't think I had a racket help me pull off as many crazy plays as the Pokey racket. Score because my opponent hit Pokey while serving, which made the ball fly out of court. Check. Score because my opponent was trying to avoid Pokey, which wasted valuable time. Check. Score by my opponent tripping on multiple Pokeys in a matter of seconds. Also check. This is, in my opinion, the best racket in the game for offensive play, while also being nearly as fun and unpredictable as the Tornado and Typhoon racket. And there you have it, the ranking of all 30 fever rackets. Do you agree with the list? Do you disagree? Let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, take care, mates.